What if I told you that a 42-year-old neurologist named Dr. Marcus Webb became the first person to notice Muhammad Ali's Parkinson's disease in 1981, but what Ali whispered to him that night was so heartbreaking that the doctor kept it secret for 35 years. When Dr. Webb finally revealed the truth on his deathbed in 2016, it exposed a side of Ali that the world had never seen. This wasn't just a medical diagnosis. This was the beginning of the end for the greatest, and the secret conversation that followed would haunt both men for decades. If this story moves you, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment about a time when you had to carry someone else's secret. Your story might help others today. October 15th, 1981. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles was quiet at 11:30 p.m. Dr. Marcus Webb was finishing his late shift in the neurology department when the emergency room phone rang with news that would change his life forever. Muhammad Ali was coming in with severe headaches, and Webb was the only neurologist available. Dr. Webb had been following Ali's career since childhood. Born in Chicago, Webb had watched every fight, memorized every quote, and even written his medical school thesis on athletic brain injuries, inspired by Ali's battles with Frazier and Foreman. But he'd never imagined he'd meet his hero under these circumstances. Ali arrived looking exhausted and older than his 39 years. His face was drawn, his eyes heavy with fatigue. But what caught Dr. Webb's attention immediately wasn't Ali's famous swagger or his towering presence. It was something much smaller, almost invisible. Ali's left hand was trembling, not the kind of trembling you get from nerves or cold. This was different. Dr. Webb had seen it before in his Parkinson's patients, the rhythmic, pill-rolling motion of the fingers, the slight rigidity in the wrist, the way Ali held his arm closer to his body, as if trying to hide something. Ali was accompanied only by Gene Kilroy, his longtime friend and business manager. No entourage, no media, no handlers, just two men seeking help in the middle of the night. The examination began routinely. Ali complained of crushing headaches that had been building for 3 days. He described the pain as worse than any punch he'd ever taken, but as Dr. Webb conducted his neurological assessment, he noticed more troubling signs. Ali's speech was slightly slurred, his movements deliberate and slower than expected. When Webb asked him to write his name, Ali's signature looked shaky, smaller than the bold autographs Webb had seen in newspapers. Most concerning was the tremor, which became more pronounced when Ali was at rest. Dr. Webb faced the most difficult moment of his medical career. He was looking at unmistakable early signs of Parkinson's disease in the most famous athlete in the world, a man whose identity was built on physical perfection, speed, and grace was showing the first symptoms of a degenerative neurological condition that would eventually rob him of everything that made him great. But what happened next changed both men forever. As Webb explained his preliminary findings, Ali's famous composure cracked. The greatest fighter in history began to cry, not the public tears of victory or loss, but the private tears of a man facing his mortality. What Ali said next was something Dr. Webb would carry for 35 years. Ali looked at the doctor and whispered something that would haunt Webb for the rest of his life. Something about his deepest fear, his greatest regret, and a secret he'd been carrying since 1975 that had nothing to do with boxing. According to Webb's deathbed confession to his son David in 2016, Ali's first concern wasn't about his career or his legacy. It was about his relationship with his estranged daughter, Miriam, who hadn't spoken to him in 6 years after a bitter family dispute. Ali told Dr. Webb that night that if he was developing Parkinson's, if he was losing his ability to speak and move, his greatest fear wasn't dying. It was dying without making peace with his daughter. He was terrified that she would remember him only as the father who had chosen boxing over family, fame over fatherhood. Dr. Webb sat in that sterile examination room and listened as Muhammad Ali, the man who had never backed down from any fight, broke down completely. Ali spoke about the nights he'd stayed awake thinking about Miriam, about the phone calls he'd started to make, but never completed, about the letters he'd written but never sent. The tremor in his hand wasn't just a medical symptom to Ali. It was a countdown clock. Every shake was a reminder that time was running out to fix the relationship that mattered most to him. What made the confession even more heartbreaking was Ali's honesty about why the relationship had fractured. In 1975, during the height of his career, Ali had missed Miriam's high school graduation because of a promotional appearance. It wasn't a fight, just a publicity event that could have been rescheduled. But Ali chose the money over his daughter. Maryam had confronted him afterward, telling him that she felt like she was competing with the whole world for her father's attention and losing. The argument escalated. Harsh words were exchanged, and they hadn't spoken since. Dr. Webb realized he wasn't just dealing with a medical case. He was watching a man confront the possibility that his greatest victory in life might have been his greatest defeat as a father. Ali made Dr. Webb promise that night that he wouldn't reveal the Parkinson's diagnosis to anyone. Not to the media, not to Ali's team, not even to his medical files. Ali wanted time to reconcile with Maryam before the world knew he was sick. But Ali also made another request that shocked Dr. Webb. He asked the doctor to help him write a letter to his daughter, not as Muhammad Ali the champion, but as a father who had made terrible mistakes and was running out of time to fix them. Dr. Webb spent 2 hours that night, helping Ali craft a letter that would eventually change everything. In it, Ali admitted his failures as a father, his regret about missing her graduation, and his fear that she would remember him only as an absent father rather than a man who loved her more than any title or trophy. The letter was brutally honest about Ali's priorities, his ego, and his realization that being the greatest in the ring meant nothing if he could unbe a good father outside of it. He wrote about how the tremor in his hand made him think about all the times he should have reached out to her but didn't. Dr. Webb mailed the letter himself the next day. 3 weeks later, Maryam called her father, for the first time in 6 years. According to Dr. Webb's 2016 deathbed confession, that phone call saved Ali's life. Not medically, but emotionally. Maryam flew to Los Angeles, spent a week with her father, and they began rebuilding their relationship. But the conversation also revealed something else that Dr. Webb kept secret for 35 years. Maryam told her father that she had always known about his attempts to reach out. She had received several letters over the years that Ali had sent, but never acknowledged. She had been waiting for him to make the first real move toward reconciliation. The Parkinson's diagnosis, ironically, became the catalyst for healing the most important relationship in Ali's life. Dr. Webb kept his promise. He never reported the early Parkinson's symptoms in 1981. Ali wasn't officially diagnosed until 1984, 3 years later, by another physician. By then, Ali had reconciled with Maryam and had time to process his condition privately. But the secret took a toll on Dr. Webb. He spent 35 years wondering if he had made the right decision by not reporting a major medical finding. He questioned whether Ali's later deterioration might have been slowed by earlier intervention. The ethical weight of keeping a patient's secret, even at the patient's request, haunted him throughout his career. When Muhammad Ali died in June 2016, Dr. Webb was among the millions who mourned, but his grief was complicated by the secret he'd carried for so long. 2 months later, when Webb himself was diagnosed with terminal cancer, he decided it was time to tell the truth. Dr. Webb's son, David, recorded his father's confession about that October night in 1981. According to David, his father's final words about Muhammad Ali were that he taught him that sometimes being a good doctor is just about medicine. Sometimes it's about understanding that behind every patient is a human being with human fears, and the greatest healing comes from human connection. The revelation of Dr. Webb's secret came at a time when the world was still processing Ali's death and legacy. But this story added a dimension to Ali's character that few had seen. It showed a man who was willing to face his greatest fear, not an opponent in the ring, but his own failures as a father. What makes this story even more remarkable is what Dr. Webb revealed about those 3 weeks between mailing the letter and Maryam's phone call. According to his deathbed confession, Ali called the hospital every single day during that period, not to check on his own condition, but to ask Dr. Webb if he thought the letter would work. Dr. Webb described those conversations as the most heartbreaking of his medical career. Here was Muhammad Ali, a man who had never shown doubt in public, calling a virtual stranger to ask if his daughter might forgive him. Ali would ask questions like whether Webb thought the letter was too long, too short, too honest, or not honest enough. During one particular call, Ali broke down completely and told Dr. Webb about a recurring nightmare he'd been having since 1975. In the dream, he was in the ring, but instead of an opponent across from him, it was Maryam as a teenage girl in her graduation gown. Every time he tried to reach her, she would disappear, and he would wake up with his hands shaking. Dr. Webb realized that Ali's Parkinson's tremor wasn't just a neurological symptom. It was his body manifesting the emotional trembling he'd been experiencing for 6 years every time he thought about his daughter. The physical disease had given form to the emotional trauma he'd been carrying. When Miriam finally called on November 8, 1981, Dr. Webb was working late at the hospital again. Ali had asked him to be present for the phone call, sitting in the same examination room where the diagnosis had been made. Dr. Webb watched as Ali's hands, which had been trembling constantly for weeks, became completely still the moment he heard his daughter's voice. The conversation lasted 3 hours. Dr. Webb, maintaining patient confidentiality even decades later, never revealed the specifics of what father and daughter said to each other that night, but he did share that at the end of the call, Ali looked at him with tears streaming down his face and said something that Dr. Webb would quote for the rest of his life. "Duck, you just gave me back my life. The Parkinsons can take my body, but you helped me save my soul." Miriam Ali, now in her 50s, confirmed Dr. Webb's account when contacted by reporters in 2016. She revealed that her father had indeed sent her a letter in 1981 that changed everything. She described it as the most honest communication she'd ever received from him, and the beginning of a reconciliation that gave them both 15 precious years together. But Miriam also revealed details about that letter that Dr. Webb had never shared. Ali had written 12 pages by hand, despite the tremor that made writing increasingly difficult. He had described in painful detail every moment of her graduation day that he had missed. He wrote about sitting in a hotel room in Las Vegas while she walked across the stage, knowing he had made the wrong choice but feeling trapped by his obligations and his ego. The most powerful part of the letter, according to Miriam, was the final page where Ali wrote about his hands starting to shake, and how every tremor reminded him of all the times he should have reached out to her but didn't. He wrote that if God was taking away his ability to fight, maybe it was because he needed to learn how to love instead. The reconciliation process wasn't immediate or easy. Miriam flew to Los Angeles in December 1981, but the first face-to-face meeting was awkward and painful. According to Dr. Webb, who observed some of their early interactions during Ali's follow-up appointments, both father and daughter had to learn how to be family again. Ali had missed 6 years of his daughter's life. He didn't know about her college graduation, her relationships, her struggles, or her dreams. Miriam had to reconcile the public image of her father with the private reality of a man who was losing his physical abilities, but finally finding his emotional ones. Dr. Webb became an unlikely counselor during this period. Ali would bring Miriam to his medical appointments, not because she needed to know about his condition, but because the hospital had become a safe space for them to work through their relationship. Dr. Webb's office became the neutral ground where they could talk honestly without the weight of Ali's fame or their shared history. The process took nearly 2 years, but by 1983, when Ali's Parkinson's symptoms had progressed enough that he needed to retire from boxing permanently, Miriam had become his primary source of support. She moved back to Louisville to help care for him, and they developed the close relationship that Ali had always wanted but never knew how to build. Dr. Webb's decision to keep Ali's secret for 35 years raises important questions about medical ethics, patient privacy, and the weight of carrying someone else's deepest fears. But it also shows us that sometimes the most important healing happens not in hospitals, but in the spaces between people who care about each other. The ethical burden of Dr. Webb's choice haunted him throughout his career. He often wondered if Ali's condition might have progressed differently with earlier intervention. But when he saw Ali and Miriam together at follow-up appointments in the 1980s, he knew he had made the right choice. The healing that took place between them was more powerful than any medicine. When Dr. Webb retired from practice in 2005, Ali and Miriam attended his retirement party. Ali's speech was barely intelligible by then, but he managed to say something that brought the entire room to tears. He thanked Dr. Webb not for diagnosing his disease, but for helping him cure his regret. The story of Dr. Webb and Muhammad Ali reminds us that behind every public figure is a private person struggling with private pain. Ali's greatest fight wasn't against Frazier or Foreman. It was against time, against pride, and against the fear that he had failed the people who mattered most. In his final interview before his death in 2016, Dr. Webb reflected on what he had learned from that October night in 1981. He said that Ali had taught him that being a great doctor was unjust about diagnosing diseases accurately. It was about understanding that every patient is fighting multiple battles, and sometimes the hidden ones are the most important. Today, the letter that Dr. Webb helped Ali write to his daughter is preserved in the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville. But, more importantly, The relationship it rebuilt between father and daughter became a model for Ali's interactions with all his children. The man who had once chosen boxing over family learned to choose family over everything else. If this story of hidden struggle and eventual healing moved you, remember that we all carry secrets, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is share them with someone we trust. Muhammad Ali's trembling hand in 1981 wasn't just a symptom of disease. It was the beginning of his most important victory, becoming the father he always should have been, and proving that the greatest champions know when to stop fighting and start loving.